Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Amy Says Dance. That's where we are. Right. Okay. Speaker today, her name is Janis Landis, and I'm going to introduce her, and then we're going to do a speed round of introductions so she gets to meet everybody. So she says her professional career was spent at the Internal Revenue Service, and upon retirement, she turned her attention to the only topic less popular than taxes, death. She started actively volunteering at the Final Exit Network. Fenn believes, as she does, that all competent adults have the right to make their own end-of-life choices. She served as the president of Fenn from 2015 until June 2019, and she continues to serve on the board of directors. Go, Janis.
Good morning. Thank you so much for all those introductions. And I would like to state for the record that I've never met a pie I didn't like. So all of those sound good to me. I want to talk a little bit about what Final Exit Network is and why it's an organization you should know about and the ways in which we can help or provide information. I like to think of what we do in a chat like this is provide a safe space for people, as is the current terminology, because people with illnesses are so much more than just their illness, but they often don't have a chance to talk about the things that concern them that relate to that illness. They can't always express what they want for the future, their fears, their concerns, because they are worried about the reaction of the people around them. We entertain any and all questions. We believe that through education and conversation, we can take away a lot of the fear, a lot of the anxiety, and enable every individual, even individuals early in life before any medical problems come their way, by having a plan. It reduces the anxiety, enables you to focus on the present. There are many things that you need to do to prepare your papers, your life, to get the kind of end of life you want. It's very much like going to a lawyer. For most people, their assets will go just the way they expect them to do, and there won't be any great drama. But a lawyer writes the will in such a way that it ensures that no matter what happens, no matter what kind of fighting goes on, no matter what kind of disagreements go on, your wishes are honored. All the little loopholes are closed up. And that is exactly the same for every individual. So Final Exit Network is a registered nonprofit. We exist to help people understand their choices, to guide them through those choices, to empower them to make the decision that works for them. We do not advocate any particular path. The path that is right is the path that meets your needs, period. And we help you find those choices, help you identify what path you want to follow. We believe that while death isn't a choice, how you die should be. I will take all questions at the end, unless something seems very critical, in which case, if Amy sees that your hand is up, let me know, but preferably we'll take all the questions at the end. I'm sure you're all familiar with the very first step, the advance directive. This is a very basic thing. Everybody should have an advance directive. It states what you think you will want. No one can know 100%. Never let that stop you from filling out the advance directive. You can always change it. But to have nothing is to do a disservice to your family to try to guess what you might want. It's to do a disservice to the medical community who doesn't know how best to help you. And as we've seen in the newspapers, it can lead to many, many unfortunate legal challenges and trauma for your family. If you already have an advance directive, just two pieces of advice. Revisit it from time to time. Things change. Family circumstances change, the progression of your illness, other medical conditions. Things change. Revisit it. And when you revisit it, if it's been a long time since you filled out that form, but there's nothing to change, I would recommend initialing it and putting the new date on there so it's very clear that you revisited it and you didn't change anything. So no one can say, well, he wrote that a long time ago, and a lot of things changed, and I don't think they still felt that way. That's number one. And two, make sure you have the most updated form. If you're not sure, go on Google, go on AARP. They will always have the most up-to-date state-specific advance directive. If your state has a specific form, it'll be on there. If it doesn't, it will give you a generic form that you can use. Once you've done that, filled it out, updated it periodically, that's only step one. And in many ways, it's the easiest part because it's just what you think you would want. The second part, which is maybe the most critical part. Did you have a question, Amy? No.
I thought you might quickly mention what an advance directive is, just in case some of us don't know.
An advance directive is a form that you fill out that says what you think you would want in the way of medical treatment. Do you want antibiotics? Do you want to go on a ventilator? It will have a whole list of questions, and you can add in specific things. Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want a feeding tube? Any number of things. And again, that may be very much change. It may be in flux as your particular situation moves along, as medical technology changes, as other things intervene. So it's your best understanding of how you want medical treatment done. So when you go into a hospital, most often now they will ask for your advance directive. We've come a long way. But them asking for your advance directive and making sure that advance directive, there's a wide gap between those things. There's many lawsuits that occur because the advance directive was overlooked or ignored. So it's a first step, but it is only a first step. If you are going in for some relatively minor procedure, you'll only be kind of out of commission for a short period of time in the recovery room and such. You probably will have a relative with you, and they will probably be able to deal with any issues that come up. But an advance directive requires a healthcare surrogate for those situations where you really temporarily or permanently do not have capacity to make decisions for yourself. I kind of think of the health surrogate as your avatar, as the person who will continue playing the game in the way you set them up to when you no longer can. Again, that surrogate will never come into play unless you're incapacitated. That could be temporary, and then you regain your capacity, and the surrogate is no longer in charge. You will never, ever, by filling out a form, you never give up control while you have capacity. It always automatically reverts back to you when and if you regain capacity. A healthcare surrogate is also called a proxy, healthcare power of attorney, an agent, has many different names. But they're all basically the same thing. There is a form, and again, in many states, it's a state-specific form. Make sure that you have that. Again, you can go to AARP. They will give you that form.
Her mommy's worried.
I'm sorry? Was there some? No.
No.
Okay. So again, that person speaks for you. They are you for that purpose.
Excuse me. What is ARP stands for?
Okay, I'm sorry. The American Association for Retired People. But when you look it up, it's always under just AARP. It's one of those things like Exxon. They don't even use the whole full name anymore. So AARP. Thank you for asking that question. You can always just Google Advance Directive, California, Healthcare Surrogate, Michigan. Google will find it for you too. I trust AARP because they have vast resources. I trust that their directory is up to date with the forms and the links, but they're by no means the only place you can go. And you can go to your own state, usually your Department of Health, or sometimes the Attorney General's office will have these forms as well. The main thing is to make sure you have the current one. So what do you look for in a surrogate? This surrogate is going to act for you. What is that? That person has to have certain attributes, certain qualities. And therefore, the first person you think of may not be your best surrogate. People tend to think of a spouse, a sibling, their oldest child, their favorite cousin, their best friend next door. They may be the most wonderful person in the world, but they may not be able to stand up to the needs of a surrogate. I'm going to give you an example of how critical a surrogate can be. And this was a real case that came to Fenn just a few months ago. Had an individual, I'll give you her name because it was on the front page of our newspaper. She's very open about it. Her name is Esther. Her husband was in hospice. He was obviously terminally ill. He was only a few weeks from death, but he was in pain, which is kind of the opposite of what you think should be happening in a hospice. The hospice movement has changed a bit. It's almost all for profit now. There are varying degrees of quality of hospices, just as with everything else. Her husband was in pain. She spoke to the nurse several times. The nurse literally told her, if you don't like the way we do things here, move your husband to a different hospice, which, by the way, there was no other hospice in that city. She spoke to the doctor several times. The doctor said, we do not like to over-medicate. So this is the way we distribute the pain medication. Sometimes there is breakthrough pain. That should never be acceptable in a hospice. It's obvious we're not worried about addiction in a hospice setting. She called Fenn. She's a member of Fenn. She called Fenn. We told her to tell the doctor that pain relief is a patient right, and that if she does not get adequate pain relief, if the hospice denies the right of her husband to adequate pain relief, she will pursue it with a Fenn attorney who is standing by, free of charge. When she said that, the doctor's response was, oh, you don't want him to be in any pain at all. Oh, well, let's adjust the medication accordingly. And there was no more pain. But that's the difference of an informed, assertive surrogate who knows the rights of the patient and is there to aggressively, if necessary, seek out the support that is necessary. That's one of the services Fenn provides. But the important thing is a surrogate who knows the patient's rights, is not afraid to ask questions, can somewhat understand. They're not a medical expert, but they have to be able to understand what process is being done and why it's being done. If the person is being brought to treatment for something, if the chemo is continuing, it's appropriate to ask, why is the chemo continuing at this stage of this person's life? Aren't they kind of past that? Similarly, I know of another instance where someone had their elderly father was being taken off to physical therapy every day. And he hated it. He just hated it. He wasn't making any progress and he hated it. He was in his 90s. He was very frail. And again, came to Fenn, and Fenn said, well, just sit down with a physical therapist and say, I'd like to see your plan of treatment. What is the physical therapy for? What are the milestones you hope to achieve? Why is this being done? There may be a valid reason that makes it important to do that physical therapy. In this particular case, as soon as that question was raised, the physical therapist said, yeah, I was thinking that maybe we should discontinue it. He's not going to be back on his feet, and he's not going to gain any mobility. But the point is, the initial thought is, well, you can't just have him lie there. And there's also, I hate to say it, but it's true, billable treatments. Lying in a bed is not a billable treatment. So I don't suggest that you assume that there's no good intent, but ask the question. Don't be afraid to ask the question. That's true for you as a patient. It's true for you as a surrogate. Why this test? What will it do? What will happen if I don't have the test? What will you do differently after I get the test? Those are reasonable questions, and your doctor should not be insulted by your asking. It's your body, it's your right, and it's your surrogate's obligation to ask those questions. Now, having said all that, you may decide that you need a different person than the logical person. Maybe your spouse is not in the best of health. Maybe they really can't be at the hospital, or maybe they're just going to be too emotional and they're going to keep saying, yes, do the next thing. Yes, do the next thing, because they love you so much and they can't bear to say no because there's always hope. But if that's not your wish, then you need to make sure that your surrogate is able to comply with that they won't be guilted into doing something. And we have seen many people, even members in our own organization, lawyers in our own organization, who when faced with a loved one dying, can't bear to say no to the next treatment. And they feel bad afterwards. But in the moment, rationality is not always uppermost. So you have to try to find somebody who can say, guilt-free, that is not what this person wanted. They didn't want the feeding tube, they didn't want the ventilator, and I don't want it for them. Getting such a person can be difficult. Sometimes you may have to cast a wide net. You may have a perfect person, but they may live in another state and have a job that makes them somewhat unavailable. That could be an issue. There are professional surrogates. They do cost money. Many social workers are now offering that service. Our own organization is going to be training people, death doulas, if you're familiar with them. Death doulas are people who are trained to be at the bedside of people who are dying. They don't provide medical treatment, but they provide compassion. We are training some of them to be healthcare surrogates. They will charge, but we hope they will charge less because our training is free. They will not have any debt coming out of our class. So there are many different ways. If you can't get a person, you might have to hire somebody. The important thing is to get the person who's right for you. When you have that person, the next important thing you can do is communicate to your family. The surrogate should never be a surprise. Maybe you have sibling A and sibling B, and sibling A is the sweetest, kindest, most attentive, let's say not sibling. So let's say you have two kids, and the kid A is the most attentive, loving, and lovable child. And B is a little bit more assertive, a little bit more cool. They may be the better choice for surrogate. They may be able to make the tough decision, but the important thing is you need to let the family know. What you don't want to have happen is if you become incapacitated and relative X steps forward and nobody knows that relative X is the surrogate and everybody else is miffed and everybody else is saying, why them and not me? Did they not trust me? You need to get that out of the way up front. This is who I've chosen. This is why I've chosen them. And to the rest of the family, you asked how you can help me. The best way you can help me is recognize that this is the individual I've entrusted with my health care and support them, trust them. It's okay to ask them a question, but do not challenge their authority. Do not go to court to get that authority. Unless you really feel this person has ignored my wishes. If they are complying with my wishes, please do not turn this into a battle around my bed. Enlist their support and their understanding in advance. Now, having done all those things, you've done a lot of the preparation that you can do in advance. to be ready. But there are a lot of issues that are going to get in the way of achieving the end of life you want. One of them is a failure to file the documents with the hospital. If you have an advance directive in a healthcare surrogate form, and they're tightly locked away in your safe deposit box, that's not going to be of use to anyone. These are not classified documents. They should be in lots of places. They should be in your surrogate's home. They should be in your doctor's file. They should be readily available in your home. Some people keep them in an emergency envelope in the kitchen, on the refrigerator, or in some spot where everybody can, or you can easily say to people, if you're in the hospital, all my forms are right in an envelope on the refrigerator. Don't lock them away. They're not a secret, and you don't know when they will be needed. That's the nature of life. None of us know when that directive or surrogate form may come into use. As we saw with COVID, things can spiral down very quickly, even with a healthy person. So you need to have the documents, you need to file them with the documents, you need to communicate, and the surrogate needs to communicate to the family, the medical staff, what it is that their role is and what they'll be looking for. Now, two big things that you need to be aware of. You have many, many legal rights, but there is a legal right. Did somebody raise their hand? Maybe not. There are limitations on your rights. First of all, you can't ask for anything illegal. You can't go in and say, I'd like you to put me out of my misery. That's illegal and unethical for a doctor to do. It's not going to happen. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, even within your legal rights, other people's legal rights may overcome your legal rights. The first example is if you go into a hospital, particularly with a religious affiliation, that hospital may refuse to comply with some of your perfectly legal advance directives. They may not agree to take you off a ventilator. They may not agree to allow you to go without antibiotics. They may say it's against their beliefs. It's a good idea to check the policy of a hospital that is likely a hospital near you that you would be taken to if you were ill, and find out in advance what their policies are. If you find yourself in a situation like that, you or your surrogate needs to ask to be transferred to a hospital that does not have those restrictions. And that may mean a very tough choice of being in a hospital further away from your family. But that hospital has a right, they have a code of ethics, they have a right to follow those. You have a right to be transferred somewhere that your wishes can be respected. So you need to know that, and your surrogate needs to know that. A second thing that we've just come upon, and frankly, a lot of us, including me, were not aware of. If you go into an assisted living facility, I'm going to read you the fine print of an actual assisted living facilities contract. This was buried somewhere very deep in the document. The spouse of the patient there did not even know it was there. And this is typical language now. This is what you sign, or your surrogate signs, or your spouse signs. Resident shall participate and comply with treatments ordered by their care service provider, which is in the hospice, in the facility, including the administration of medications. Failure to adhere to these rules and additional resident responsibilities can be cause for discharge. That means you have told that assisted living facility that you will obey their doctor's instructions, not your advance directive, not your personal doctor's recommendations. This is something that we're just beginning to take a look at. It is a big, big boulder in the road. Many people are in assisted living. Many people feel that they will have the right to take what steps they want. For example, a very common thing that people choose to do is to refuse medical treatment to hasten their end. This contract will not let you do it, and they will discharge you. It's not at all clear that they have any obligation to place you anywhere else, and you've probably paid a lot of money for that. So this is a very big issue, which we are looking into, and we have one case now that we hope to litigate. And when we do litigate a case, because we think it's a good test case, there is no charge for that. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to do. Other issues that may come up that will block you from getting what you want. Of course, there'll be the question of competency. If you are in dementia, and if you have carefully stated that you do not want treatment, then that should be medical treatment. That should be enforceable. Although again, your surrogate may have to go to court to enforce it, but you have a right not to have medical treatment. Or you may have to be transferred to somewhere that will accept that. Many people choose voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. That means exactly what it sounds like. You don't have anything orally. You have a right not to have a feeding tube. You have a right to not have artificial hydration. Some people choose voluntary stopping of eating and drinking to cause death. It is legal in every state. Some facilities that you're in may not allow it. But if they do allow it, and if you are in a somewhat weakened state, particularly people, let's say with stage 4 cancer, probably don't have much of an appetite, their body is shutting down, it may be a very peaceful way to end one's life if that's what you choose. Other illnesses where your organs are in great shape, it's still possible, but it's a longer and more difficult road. There are many ways you can make it a little bit smoother with the help of someone conversant with VSED, and that's what VSED is, voluntary stopping eating and drinking. As I said, we call it VSED. You can get some help if a doctor is willing to work with you. At some point along that process, you will be declared hospice ready, and then you can get the service of a hospice. But all of that has to be worked out. If you have dementia and you have written that you want, at a certain point in dementia, you want to stop eating and drinking, that's not a medical treatment. You have no way of enforcing it if you are not mentally competent. So a big issue right now is for people who are writing supplementary directives for dementia, and FEN has one of those. The question is, what happens when they put food in front of you? You are now in dementia. You've written when you were mentally competent that you don't want food. But if they put food in front of you, you're most likely going to eat it, because that is just a basic reflex among human beings. Your mouth's just going to open. It's ice cream. You're going to take it. That's going to be taken as proof that you did want to eat. And so far, there are no clear rulings on the right of that competent self to overrule the now no longer competent self. We are looking for test cases on that as well. We would like to be able to establish that your competent self can make that directive for your non-competent state. It appears that Nevada now allows that, and we're looking to see if there's a case that's going to test that out. But you need to be aware also that in addition to facilities not possibly not allowing you to have VSED on the premises, they also may require a new do not resuscitate form every time a person is admitted back to a facility. The old one may not be considered acceptable on a new admission. They may not have your advance directive or your surrogate on file. All these forms have to be checked all of the time to be sure that everybody knows what it is you want. There are many instances where people's advance directives are ignored. We had a case where somebody asked specifically not to have antibiotics, and the doctor gave the person who was no longer awake. It wasn't a question of dementia, it was a question of their physical state being such that they were no longer able to make decisions. Their surrogate specifically said no antibiotics. That was written in the advance directive. The doctor simply ignored that. You can, and we will sue in those cases, but the reality is by the time that lawsuit takes place, there's been a long period of time in which those antibiotics have kept that person alive against their wishes. There is now a new field of lawsuit of wrongful prolongation of life, which is if you have decided these are treatments you don't want, and those treatments are administered against your advance directive. People have sued and people have sued successfully. The law has now become clear that it is the responsibility of the hospital to know and to have available and to check your advance directive. They cannot say we weren't able to reach the surrogate, or, well, this in the middle of this crisis, we didn't have time to check. No, the advance directive, the healthcare surrogate, those forms have to be available. They have to be consulted. They should be on a paper that stands out, and you have a right to have it enforced. Your estate can sue and have successfully sued. There was recently one in Alaska. There was a big settlement in Georgia. So again, what FEN tries to do is give everybody these tools to know what your choices are, what your rights are. You may be a person who wants to fight to the very last minute for every possible second, and we endorse that if that is the right choice for you. There are people who will want to simply stop their medication and let nature take their course. There are people who will want to try voluntary stopping eating and drinking, and there are people who will want to hasten their death through legal self-deliverance. And we also provide information about that, and all of those things are free. Our coordinator provides information for free. Our exit guides provide a compassionate presence for those who wish to hasten their death. But what I want to emphasize is we do not encourage, advocate, or suggest any of these options. FEN believes in the right of the individual to determine what is best for them, when and how they decide is up to them. I'm going to add one more thing, and then I'll take some questions. For those of you living in a state with medical aid in dying, you may feel, why do I need to know any of this? Anytime I want to check out, there's MAID. Not true. And particularly for people with neurological diseases, you must be 6 months from terminal, although some states now are going to broaden that. But you also must be mentally competent, and you must be physically capable of ingesting the medication. Many people, and I'll take, for example, ALS, which tends to be very fast moving, they will not be certified as within 6 months of death in most cases, because there really is no way to know. But what is equally true is they may lose the ability to raise a glass to their mouth. They may lose the ability to swallow. And so for them, the MAID law may come too late. You have to be mentally competent and physically competent enough to carry out the act. And you have to have both those things within 6 months of terminal. Many, yes.
What you said, MAID law?
Medical aid in dying law. The medical aid in dying law, which is true in California and other states. Most states don't have it. Many states do have it. But again, many people think that is, the solution for everybody. It is very limited. And what's more, the individual doctor who used to make decisions in the interest of their best patient, of the best interest of their patient, that individual doctor doesn't much exist anymore. Most doctors are in a practice. Most doctors are bound by the standards of practice in the group they belong to. And in many cases, they've been told they cannot take patients under the medical aid in dying law. So you need to know, if you are in such a state, will your doctor cooperate with the medical aid in dying law if you qualify? Some doctors will just say, oh, you're a long way from that. Let's not talk about that now. And then when you do need to ask, they say, no, my practice doesn't allow me. It used to, but they just issued something and said, we can't cooperate with that. So you need to be very informed and very educated. And I want to suggest to you that one of the ways that you can keep educated is consider a membership in FEN. We offer guest memberships for free for a year. We provide everything we provide to members and non-members is free. If we are counselors that let you know where a hospice might be, how you qualify for hospice, where to go to qualify under a medical aid in dying law, that's free. We have a health surrogate consultant for a surrogate to call to answer questions, ethical questions, legal questions. If your wishes are not being honored, we will provide an attorney for free to litigate and get those legal rights enforced. But of course, since we don't charge anyone, we do rely on the generosity of people who join and support us in that cause. If you're interested in a free membership, I believe that you will have information available to you that I think, Amy, you got some information that she can make available. Final exit.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do. And I'll be sending it out to everybody afterwards.
Great.
Are you ready for questions?
Sure.
Somebody has asked, could you please explain the POLST form? Pulse?
Sure. Yeah. The POLST is also known as MOLST in some states. It's the medical order life-sustaining treatment. This does not come into play early on. I don't have a MOLST or POLST, and probably most of you don't either. It's something that the doctor draws up with you when you are at a point where you may not want life-sustaining treatment, you may not want DNR anymore. It's not done in advance. It's done at the point where those difficult decisions are made. I don't know, Jay, if you want to add anything to that. No. It's not something for you to worry about. You can certainly ask your doctor, when does a MOLST or POLST become something I should think about? But it's really much further along when you're ready to not have any life-sustaining treatment. You don't want to be resuscitated. You don't want any emergency procedures done to keep you alive.
Okay, I see that Soon has a question. Soon, you're on mute, so you want to take yourself off mute soon. Soon, you're muted.
Who is qualified to go to the hospice? Who
I'm
is
sorry.
qualified?
Who's qualified to
To
For
go
the
into a
hospice, right?
go into hospice? Is it who is qualified to go into hospice? Is that the correct question, Soon?
Right.
Okay.
That's a good question. As a general statement, you have to be 6 months from terminal. And that's because what the requirements that Medicare has set out as when they would be reimbursable, allowable expenses. Now, the problem with that is, of course, that nobody knows when 6 months. It's impossible to accurately predict that. We all know the people who are 6 months from death and they're alive 2 years later, and we know people who were given 6 months to live and died the next day. There's no certainty. And any doctor will tell you that this is really a guess. But the main thing is that you have a condition which is going to be terminal. You're not in stage 1 cancer, you're in stage 4. You're not at the beginning of a congestive pulmonary disorder of COPD, you're at a later stage of it. If it seems that you meet that, then 6 months, then you could be admitted. To the best of my knowledge, no one's ever been kicked out after 6 months because it's taking them longer to die. It's just a way of managing the admission process. I suppose that it is possible that somebody could go in believing that they're terminal, and something wonderful happens, some new treatment comes along, and they go into remission and they're in great shape, and then they leave. You're not required to die once you're in there either, but it's just a way of setting a threshold for admission.
Other questions?
Actually, this is a comment. They actually denied hearing aids for somebody who had insurance that should have covered hearing aids, but they were in hospice. Which is really a shame, because that person needed them and was unable to hear. Well, we donated some to them to use, but.
Well, I would certainly hope that somebody, if a case like that, I hope somebody will come to us and we would look into that, because a hospice is not supposed to deny. It doesn't mean you give up all treatment. That is not even true. And what's more, a hearing aid is much more than just comfort. It's the way you keep connected to the society around you. And for somebody who is in the terminal stages, I can't think of anything that's more important than being able to go on a FaceTime with people or tell the nurse how you're feeling. I would consider that very cruel. But hospices, and I want to emphasize this, the hospice model started as a nonprofit, almost sacred experience, a sacred place for dying. Every new hospice that is now opened, every new hospice without fail, is for profit. They don't differ a lot from nursing facilities. The bottom line matters. So we've come a long way away from that ideal. Hospice can be wonderful, but as in the example I gave, it's not always wonderful. You have to have an advocate for you in any part of the medical process.
Janice, I think a lot of people on this particular call are extremely frustrated with the neurological piece of this. It's clear that if you have cancer, you have some choices, but if you have a neurological issue, nobody wants to touch that. And is there any precedents, any cases at all that have proven or shown that there's some options for people with neurological disorders?
First of all, I agree with you. From my point of view, in Final Exit, although we get maybe the majority of people who come to us to look to ways to hasten their death are cancer patients, but that's because of the number of cancer patients there are. But the second category, and a growing category, is neurological diseases, because they are in this neverland of not qualifying for under these medical aid and dying laws. They don't have any quick resolution. Yes, there are several things you can do. The first thing, which is not an easy thing to do, is to tell your doctor you do not want any curative prescriptions. You don't want an antibiotic anymore. But I'm talking about someone who's ready to say, I've had enough of this, I've fought it long enough. And I want to emphasize that everybody's choice point is different. There is no right or wrong. For Final Exit, the moment is when you decide the scales of your quality of life have tipped and the negative outweighs the positive. That is a personal decision. That is not, in our opinion, a decision for a doctor. It's not a decision for your family members. Jay?
Yeah, I am the chair of the committee in FEN that decides whether we should accept them or not. And we accept 95% of those who apply. We have many clients who have purely neurologic problems. So
Thank you.
FEN, if you want our support, we will often approve that support, and you don't have to be close to dead or anything else. You can just be saying my life isn't going the way it should, and I need to know what my options are.
Thank you. So yes, as you said, Jay looks at those cases, and most of those are approved. So the first thing you can do, as I said, is if you're not ready to take an active position, you can say, I don't want antibiotics anymore. I'm not very active anymore. I know I'm probably going to get a respiratory infection, and without antibiotics, I may die. That's my choice, and that's my right. They used to call pneumonia the old man's friend for that reason. So that is one sort of passive option, if you will. You can say no more treatment, palliative care only. And if your neurologist is not willing to do that, seek out someone who is only a palliative care specialist, and say, all I want is pain relief and comfort. That's an option you have. You do not have to keep taking life-prolonging medications. That's one. Two is, as I said, voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. It's a difficult process, but there are guides who will help you through it. It is increasingly accepted. It's always legal, but it's increasingly accepted as a perfectly valid method to end your life. And the third, as Jay has said, is Final Exit is the only organization that will work with people who do not have a death determined date. You may have years, for example, with dementia. Someone with the early stages of dementia may say, that's a 10-year road ahead of me, and I don't want to go down that road. What FEN will do is people apply, and I emphasize everything is free. There is no charge. You apply, there's paperwork, you'll be guided through your statement, your medical records. We need all of that kind of information, your understanding of what it is that you're asking. For example, and I'm going to take a dementia patient. A person in the early stages of dementia is still qualified to make decisions about their life. The idea that they don't remember who was president 10 years ago does not mean that they're in dementia. If they can't add 32 and 78 in their head, that's not disqualifying. They have to, because I can't do any of those things either. It means, do you understand the nature of the decision you are making? Are you still understanding what life and death are and the permanency of death? If you were able to understand those things, then you're mentally competent to make a decision. Then the paperwork that will follow will show all of the support for the quality of life that's being diminished. We had a Parkinson's patient who said that most of her joy came, she used to crochet and knit and do all this beautiful work, and she couldn't do that anymore. And as these things became increasingly difficult, the things that gave meaning and pleasure to her life no longer existed, and she chose to exit. Other people may say, as long as I can see my grandchild, that's all I need to keep me going. These are very personal decisions. We would never tell someone, this is the right moment, this is the wrong moment. When you feel that it is the right moment, you submit the papers to us. It goes through the medical committee. Those are doctors like Jay who volunteer their time. They're not paid. And if you are approved, then you're assigned an exit guide. The exit guide, usually with another exit guide, well, there'll be an interview on the phone first, but they will actually come to your home. That's free of charge. They will sit with you, and if you have a spouse or an immediate relative that lives with you, they'll talk to both of you and ask, what it is you want, why you want it. We have to know that you're in a place where it can be done. If you are living in an assisted living facility, it may not be possible. But if your family member vociferously objects, it may not be possible. But if those conditions are met, then you would be given information on how to peacefully, safely, and quickly end your life in a way, again, that is safe and painless. And it is completely legal, because there is a myth that suicide is illegal. Suicide is not illegal in any state. Assisting in a suicide is. It's the only crime that I've ever heard of where the act is legal and assisting in it is illegal. It would be as if you could rob a bank, but you can't drive the getaway car. That's the state of our laws. But that's not to say that they wouldn't find you mentally unstable, and that is a great danger. If you decide to end your life, you should not be discussing it with people. We have had people who were overheard saying it and who wound up, and I'm not saying this to terrify anybody, but it has happened just a few months ago to somebody. Their housekeeper heard that they were thinking of ending their life due to their illness, and the next thing you know, the police showed up and they were in a psychiatric ward. These things do happen. But FEN exists to guide you through that process in a safe way. And if you decide you want to end your life, we can tell you the methods. They're available on the internet. They're available in books. They're not a secret. But we will only discuss it with someone who's passed these medical criteria, because we do not want to deal with someone who's depressed because the boyfriend left them. So once we've gone through those safeguards and you know how to do it, if you want us to be a compassionate presence, we will not help you. We cannot legally assist you, but we can and will be a compassionate presence with you as you choose to end your life. And there is no cost for any of this. Jay, did you want to say something?
I just want to say, before you submit anything, your primary contact is with a coordinator. We have a number of very good coordinators who will spend a lot of time with anybody who wants to know more and determine whether they want to submit an application.
Thank you.
Coordinator.
That's a 1-800 number. That will always be your first entry, or the email address on our website will always be your first point of entry. And from that, it will be directed to the right person, which is usually the coordinator. If it's a surrogate question, I'm a surrogate and I have a question, it'll go to a different person. But normally it will go to a well-trained counselor who will call you and get the information, they may find out that particular person does not qualify. Somebody may be calling about their spouse, and their spouse is already in the deep stages of dementia, and there really won't be much that we can do for them except to tell them that they can refuse treatment for that person. They don't have to keep them alive with antibiotics and such. So we will tailor to that specific person. But the important thing is to know your rights, to know what choices you have. And most importantly, I can't emphasize this enough, people around you will tend to say, don't give up, keep on fighting, we love you, you need to do this, you need to keep alive for us. That is totally unfair to you. You have a right to speak your mind about how you feel. We're not allowed to say, I've given up. The society doesn't allow us to say that. You have to fight and fight and fight, and people will try to shut you up if you talk. It's one of the benefits of the counselor, is the counselor will listen to you and not be judgmental and not try to give you a rah-rah speech. Oh, I knew somebody, who had this and that, and boy, they lasted 15 years and they were happy to the end. Your story is your story. Do not let your family stop you from expressing your concerns, your fears, and your desires for how things will progress. Have that conversation. I will tell you a true story about one of our doctors. He was not with FEN at the time, but he was a doctor who worked in the Right to Die movement. And he had a patient with multiple sclerosis. She wanted to end her life, and she had the means to do it with medication that she had stored up. Her brother was adamantly opposed. adamantly opposed. He said he would never accept it. He would call the police. He would blah, 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 blah. And he lived in another state. The doctor said to his patient, tell your brother he needs to come and live with you for a week. He cannot help you. He cannot do anything for you. He can't do your laundry. He can't cook your food. He can't do your shopping. All he can do is sit and watch you struggle through a week of life as it is for you. At the end of that week, the brother said, not only do I support your decision, but I would be honored if you let me sit here with you while you drink that drink. We are sometimes too solicitous of the other person.
That's an amazing story. I want to recognize that Judy has a question. So
Yeah, yes, sure.
Yes, I do have that no drinking and no, food and water at end of life. But what do you, because dementia can be a part of Parkinson's, is there another form that we need to make that comply, or is it, what do you do for that?
Well, it wouldn't hurt. I understand that dementia and Parkinson's are different things, but that at some point Parkinson's may move into dementia. So I would say, to be on the safe side, to fill out the supplemental advance directive for dementia care, which is free on our site, and which specifies that you do not want any food, any hydration or nutrition provided to you. Obviously, you don't want it artificially, but that's a medical thing. So that can be in your advance directive, but that you don't want it. If you fill that out and you make it clear that even if you were demented, you still want that, that's an extra level of protection for you that they cannot then argue. The problem is, and this is something that gnaws at us in Final Exit, is that the cruelty of the laws, particularly for people with neurological diseases, is that they force you into either an acceptance of a life you don't want when you're totally incapacitated and possibly mentally not clear, or they make you leave too much life on the table. And that I cannot tell you that I have a solution for that, because unfortunately the progress of neurological diseases is so scary because it's so unknown. I have two friends with Parkinson's with totally different trajectories and timeframes, even though they were diagnosed at the same time. So I understand that. And so only you can decide the point at which you feel that window might be closing and decide whether or not you want to do something about it. The Parkinson's Foundation will not talk about this, and your family won't talk about it. I would encourage you, if you have a need to talk about it, to call one of our coordinators who will not be judgmental, who will not give you a pep talk. They will listen to what your wants are, your desires, your fears for the future, and how to deal with them. One of the most dramatic things, and I'll take more questions in a minute, but one of the most dramatic things that has always stayed with me was the aftermath of Robin Williams' death. Robin Williams had Parkinson's and he had Lewy body syndrome. With all the money and all the good care that he got, nobody ever thought to say to him, how are you feeling about this? What do you feel you want? And when he died, and he had to die at his own hands with a rope, strangling himself, I have the clipping somewhere because it just blew my mind so much. The first response from one of his daughters was, I'm so sad that our love for him wasn't enough for him to stay alive. The most completely selfish statement a family member can make. Not, I am sorry that I didn't recognize the pain he was in and offer to be with him if he chose that he couldn't go on. You need to make it very clear that it's about you, not them. It's your life, your body that's waking up to the tremors or the pain or the fear or all the many things. You're not allowed to talk about it because our society doesn't believe in negativity. Everything's going to be fine. How many times do people say that? You're going in for an MRI test, you're scared out of your mind, and everybody you know says, it's going to be fine. There's no way they know it can be fine, but this is what we're trained to do. Insist on the right to talk to your family and your doctor, and stand your ground as to what you want. You have a right to your bodily autonomy. And I might add, the biggest thing that people fear isn't pain, because in almost all, not all, but in almost all cases, pain can be controlled. The loss of bodily autonomy is the most devastating thing. And that's what the neurological diseases produce. And that is what our society has most refused to engage in. I got any questions?
Thank you, Janice. Anybody else have any questions?
I just want to point out, thank you for bringing up the word selfish, because many of my close friends and some of them in this group today have discussed this. We've spent time discussing this, and nobody wants to say to your kid or your husband or whatever, please don't be selfish. But that's what it is.
Yes.
When you're still clear of mind and stuff, you need to remind them that if they're keeping you here, is it for you or is it for them?
That's exactly right. And I might add, a lot of people are embarrassed by the fact that a family member may end their life voluntarily. They feel that it's a reflection on them.
And if we do it right, like what you suggested, it wouldn't be suicide. Suicide has that connotation of mental health issues. And this proves that it doesn't have to be a mental health issue.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think of it, I think of it as the pilot's ejection seat. A pilot feels better knowing that the ejection seat is there. Most pilots will never use it, but nobody considers him selfish because he's going to press it and let the plane crash, because he can't go on any longer. And that's why there's an ejection button. That's perfectly reasonable. And many people having that don't even need to do anything. Just knowing they have control makes a huge difference in people's lives. Many people who apply to us do not go on and exit because knowing they can exit gives them peace of mind. But tell your family, you don't want to hear pep talks. You want to hear reality, and you want to be allowed to express those feelings, and you want to be heard and understood. You are a competent adult who has your own opinion, and that opinion is, in the final analysis, the only one that counts.
Laurel, I see you.
Oh, I just wanted to say one thing. Thank you so much for bringing up the story about Robin Williams. And I cringed when his daughter made that comment. I had the opportunity to meet Robin Williams once. I danced in a benefit that he was in. And then I was at a benefit for the film Suicide, the Ripple Effect, that his son was a speaker at. And after he ended his life, and his son did not feel as his daughter did. And his son gave me a hug, and we spoke, and he understood. He got it.
Well, that is great to hear. And I think that's one of the things that you can do, is make that more understood, that there is this. And by the way, if you know, the Parkinson's Foundation does not let us talk about this. They will have nothing to do with us. So I think one of the things that people with Parkinson's do is lobby with Parkinson's Foundation that you want more information about end-of-life options. If you know other support groups, we will be happy to make presentations. We never charge anything. We don't sell anything. We don't even have a tote bag to give you. We sell nothing, and our exit guides and our doctors are all volunteers. I'm a volunteer. We don't even have a building, a headquarters. We do this just because we believe in the compassionate right of people to take their own end of life decisions. It is not for a doctor to decide when you've suffered enough. It is not for a state legislature to decide when you've suffered enough. It's not for your family to decide. It's your body, your life, your decision. You owe no apologies to anybody when you fought the good fight and decided it's enough.
Woohoo! Thank you so much, Janice. This has been so much more than I had anticipated, and I'm so happy we had you here today, because for a while now, this group I think we talked a little bit about it, but this group has been together meeting daily for over almost 2 years. We're coming up on 2 years.
Wow.
And it took a long time for us as a group to have this discussion for the first time. It was well over a year of daily meetings before this came up. And we finally felt like we had the courage to have this conversation in an open forum like this. It took us a long time to get here. And I am so proud of everyone on this screen who was willing to come to this conversation and just say, I want to hear about this. I'm not saying I want to do this. I'm not advocating anything other than education. I just want to know. And I'm so glad you were here today, because I feel like I'm much better educated now. And now I feel like I need to go out on some sort of campaign trail and bring this talk to other people, because this has been really helpful to me. Greg, I see you.
I'm advocating a new song for the ASD group. It's Sky Pilot.
Well, you know, this morning we had Oingo Boingo. It's a dead man's party. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did that end up on today's playlist? You know, this is a strong group of people who are very strong and very thoughtful. And I am so glad we had this conversation today. Does anybody else have any further questions? Because I'm noticing it's 10 after 10 and I want to be honorable to everybody's time. Kelly has a question. Go, Kelly.
I can't resist saying that, Will, we covered breathing in ISD and now we've covered not breathing.
That's right.
Is an option. Again, if you have any other, is that a hand up?
Oh, yeah, Nancy, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. Thanks for everything, but thanks for the phrase, I don't need a pep talk, because yes, I'm still getting that, excuse me, SHIT from people.
Yes.
And it's a nice short way of saying, stop. I don't need to hear this is better than cancer. You're doing
Right.
well,
Better
blah,
than
blah, blah.
cancer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
my
a good one.
favorite line is, if you have to choose a neurological disorder, Parkinson's is the best one. It's like, gosh,
Oh, yes,
thanks.
you won the neurological disease lottery.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks,
I know.
guys.
People always feel the need to provide you with the positive side of something that frankly does not have a positive side. And you should not have to listen to it, and you should be adamant that you do not want it. You have rights as a human being to tell people that when their comments are not helpful. And people may be offended by that, but that's their problem. They need to learn that you have a functioning mind that can make its own decisions in your best interest. And anything you can do to get the Parkinson's Foundation into reality, write them, let them know you want forums on end-of-life options. You want to be told.
I'm not gonna bother with the Parkinson's Foundation. I think I know which organization I'll be having this conversation with, because there's an organization who I think will listen. There's several of us who are involved, so more to come on that. But
well, we are great. We are available for free at any time, and because of Zoom, we can talk to even a small number of people. When we used to have to travel, it had to be a certain size group, but anytime, anywhere, I will be more than happy to answer questions, to give this talk, to tailor it to a specific subject if people prefer that. But I want you to know that we are here for you in the way that you want us to be there for you. It is your decision for us to support.
I love it. I thank you so much for
Well,
your
thank you
time.
all.